everyone, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be discussing, to me, a fun topic, but also a very scary topic, because we're going to be chatting through the most intimidating books on my TBR. I'm going to be doing today the intimidating TBR tag, which basically is a series of questions that makes you pick out the books on your shelf that you've kind of been avoiding for a variety of different reasons. Maybe they're very long. I've got a lot of those. Maybe they're outside of your genre comfort zone, etc., etc. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the questions and my very intimidating TBR. I'll say I'm usually pretty good about not being intimidated, but there are definitely some books I'm about to show off that I have been putting off for a long time. So I'm definitely exposing myself a bit, but anyway, let's dive right in. So the first question I've had to modify slightly. It is originally, what book have you just not been able to finish? I have actually, in the past like 3 months, been able to either start and almost complete and like working to complete, or have finally completed books that I have just been unable to get through for the past year, in some cases years. So like I've been working on this. I've become an evolved, better person in this scenario. So instead I had to pick a book that I would say took me the longest to get through. It felt perhaps a little painful to read. I didn't necessarily want to pick it up all the time. It was also a very long book. It was a book that I was on my TBR just in general for a really long time due to its length. So the book for this I've decided to pick is Jonathan Strange and Mission Norrell. I don't know. I liked this book, generally speaking, but it was just it was so laborious to get through. And I know this is a lot of people's favorite book, so I'm not trying to like go after Jonathan Strange and Mission Norrell. I can definitely see why it's very beloved, but for me personally, there was something about it that was just hard for me to get through. It's just kind of like this 18th century magician society novel. It's clever, it's funny, it has some interesting magic, but there is a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of parlor politics, and usually I really like that, but there's only so many times I can watch Mission Norrell be boring around people. Generally speaking, this would be the one I'd pick for this just because it took me about 5 months to actually read. And again, length usually isn't a factor in terms of me not completing a novel. Like, I read 1,000-page books all the time. So like, this was truly just a book I just could not get into, and it was a struggle to get through. All right, all of the next set of questions are books that I haven't gotten to for a variety of reasons. It's basically, I have not read this book because ... So the first one, it is because I haven't had the time, and for this I'm gonna go with The Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch. I quickly read books 1 and book 2 within this series. Only 3 books are currently out, but there's something about this third one I just haven't put on my TBR yet. I'm sure I will in the upcoming months, but it is longer than the other ones. I think it's about 800 pages or so. And I just haven't really felt like I was gonna make the time for this. I'm like prioritizing other series and other books. This is a series I really love. It's not anything against it. I just haven't truly been like making, carving out the space within my TBR for this third novel in this series. I'm actually really looking forward to this. This is the third book to the Gentleman Bastard series, which basically follows a set of characters in their mischievous ways. It's set in this kind of Venetian mercantile fantasy world, and we're following our main character Locke Lamora as he's basically tricking the pants and the coin out of rich people's pockets, and it's just absolutely so entertaining following his schemes and trying to figure out what in the world he's getting up to and how he's gonna figure it out. The last 2 books were totally gripping, and they also kind of have these larger things pulling from book to book. So there's definitely an element of a cliffhanger at the second book, so I'm curious to see how all of that is going to unfurl itself in this third one, but I just have not been making the time for this. I just haven't had it on my TBR. I should definitely try to read it this spring, I think, but I needed to get it together, basically, is what I'm saying. Next book is a sequel, and I'm going with The Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb, and I could also do The Royal Assassin, which is book 2. I read the first book in this original Farseer trilogy back in January, and I have not read books 2 or 3 yet, and I've definitely not read this super long book 3. I think this is also like 800 pages or something like that. Again, kind of looking forward to the length of this series, but this is just a series I just have not picked up. And I have technically really not picked this up because this is the third book, so I need to read the second book before I can jump into this. I do have plans to read the second book hopefully this month, or at least in early March, just depending on when I get to it. This is like a really classic. In this series, you're following our main character, which you follow literally from childhood through his entire adulthood, through his like becoming an assassin. In the first one, you're really following him kind of become centered in the court politics and begin his destiny, his training. And in these later 2 books, which I'm really looking forward to reading, I'm pretty sure the the politics are kind of amped up and the plot dynamics kind of get a little more extreme and a little more intense, which I'm looking forward to. They also get much, much longer compared to the first one, but I'm really excited to read more Robin Hobb this year, so I need to get to books 2 and 3 of this series. But yeah, technically I have not read this book because it is the 3rd book to a series in which I need to read the 2nd book, so it happens. Next reason is because the book is brand new, and I'm going with Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare, The Last Hours book 1. This is especially true because this book isn't even out yet. It is so brand new. I have an arc that I should read before, you know, this book comes out in March 2020. But this is honestly a book I'm really highly anticipating, and I know the rest of the internet is as well. This is the first book to a new series within the Shadowhunter world, of course, which is kind of like a paranormal classic YA romance, monster, demons, hunting series, and in my opinion, each trilogy she has written has gotten more complex, more interesting, a lot more dynamic characters and plots. So I'm really pumped to check out this series. I also believe this is set in the past, like this has some sort of historical fiction component to it, and perhaps is even set in London. And we all know how well the Clockwork Princess series went, aka it was incredible, so another hopefully very angsty Shadowhunters book set in London. I'm thrilled, and I really need to pick this up. And I definitely want to get to it at least in March and read it along with everyone else. But I just got this in the mail not too long ago, so that's definitely why I have not picked it up yet. So the next question I also had to revise slightly. The original version of this question is, you haven't read the book because you've read another book by this author and didn't like it very much. Instead though, I'm gonna go with, I've read a book by this author and I loved, and this one I just couldn't get into very much. I'm sitting on my TBR pile after I've only read about 50 pages and not really continued it. I guess technically this could have qualified for question 1, but I honestly don't feel like I got far enough along in it to even say that I haven't been able to finish it. And that is Bridge of Clay by Marcus Zusak. This is the author of The Book Thief, which is probably one of my top 5 favorite books of all time. The book was so astounding to me when I first read it. It was so integral in my reading experience growing up. It was just mind-boggling to me at the time, and as an adult I've reread it and loved it as well. This is his first book in ages, like over a decade since he released a book, and I was so excited for it to come out. And there's just something about this that I just couldn't immediately get drawn into the narrative. It's written in a very interesting way. This is basically following a family of young boys, young in that they're raising themselves in a house really without any parental supervision, and they kind of range in age. It's set in Australia. I think it's supposed to be like alluding to like childhood feelings that maybe Marcus Zusak had felt himself. It's also really about like brother connections and like brother companionship. It's written in a very disorienting way. It's cool, but it's like it jumps around in a way that's very hard to follow. The writing is beautiful. Marcus Zusak is known for his writing, but I think just the POV of it was kind of jolting when I first tried to pick it up. I should probably give this another try, but this is actually like very sad to me that I have not read this book yet. But yeah, I would say this is a book by an author I love, and I just have not been able to get into his newest release, which is just, I've been waiting for this book for so long because I think he announced that he was writing in like 2010 or something. But anyway, I need to read this, but I'm having a hard time getting into it. Anyone else? Next question is, you haven't read the book because you're just not in the mood for it. And I honestly have like a whole genre, and that is long, sad, intense literary fiction. There's something about these books that I know I really want to read, like The Goldfinch, which I have on my bookshelf, like The Queen of Night, like A Little Life. But it's just, I know these books have a lot of emotional turmoil. I know they're really intense, they're long, they're like, I don't know. I really have a hard time wanting to pick up a book that I know is gonna make me like really upset and like very sad and like really have to just like push my way through, not only because they're long and lengthy and like very intricate, but also because they have like a lot of emotional impact and stakes in a way that sometimes, like, I read fantasy for a reason. I love escapism, and these are like very intensely real life books, if you know what I mean. So because of that, I have these on my shelf. I want to read them. They've been on my TBR for forever, but I'm just never in the mood to just be like weighed down by the earth, man. It's too real life sometimes. This book is, I haven't read it because it's humongous. I guess for that I would go with The Burning White by Brett Weeks. This is the 5th and final books to the Lightbringer series, which is one of my favorite all-time high fantasy series. The concluding novel came out last year and I have not yet picked it up. Honestly, partially I'm intimidated because it's long, but honestly, it's just under 1,000 pages and I could definitely pick it up. But what's really keeping me from this is I want to be prepared, and I've gotten to my own head about like, oh, I need to maybe reread the whole series before I check this out. So many people have let me know that he does a really great job summarizing the series in the upfront of this book. So there's really no need to read summaries and there's no reason for me to put this off. But I keep looking at it and being like, oh, that's a really big book. Before I jump in, I need to be prepared. I need to be prepared. So because of that, I keep putting this off and I'm going to stop. This is definitely gonna be on my TBR for the spring, maybe March, maybe April. I've got to read this book. But this is an incredible high fantasy series that has one of the most unique and interesting magic systems. It's centered around the spectrum of light, and essentially the more colors you can control, the more powerful you are. Each color kind of manifests in a different kind of power. However, there is a negative impact on the magic wielder in that the more magic you use and harness, the quicker you die. So when there's like war and conflict and people are like going off to fight, they could survive a 5-year war only to come home and die a year later from health complications of using magic so like continuously. So that adds a really interesting layer to the politics and the political system in this world. I really liked books 1 through 4. I need to read this 5th book. Next question was, because it was a cover buy and then since you found out it had kind of mixed reviews, for this I picked the Hazelwood. This is one, but like one, I absolutely love this cover. But I also picked this up knowing it had mixed reviews, which is kind of making me hesitant to kind of pick it up, but I really want to see like what I think of it myself. It has a lot of buzzwords, not only for the beautiful cover, which drew my eye, but it has a lot of buzzwords in the summary that are things I usually really love. It's basically a dark YA fairy tale inspired story about a young girl and her mother who are kind of always on the road. They inherit their grandmother's property shortly after moving there. Her mother is kidnapped by this forest and she has to go and try to save her. I love dark, eerie forests. I love beautiful lyrical writing. I like dark stories. Sometimes they don't have to totally make sense, but we'll see. I have been putting this off, like putting off picking it up and also reading it because of the mixed reviews. And I'm just curious kind of where I stand in this one. I have a feeling I might really like it, but we'll see. And the very last question for this video is the most intimidating book on your TBR. And I think I have to go with A Little Life. I mean, if you look at the cover, do they even look like they're having a good time? No. So like, I'm worried this will be my face while reading and enjoying this novel. Like, I know it's intense. I think it basically just follows the life of people. I don't even know very much happens in this. I think it's just like intense and sad, and there's not really like a resolution perhaps, kind of like life itself. Obviously, this is a very beloved book within literature at large. I need to read it. I know I've owned this book for 5 years, have not picked it up. And you know, it's gonna happen one day. I honestly could not tell you when though. Could not tell you when. I'll use the everyday over the extraordinary. So I feel like this is both slow moving, a slow burning, but an agonizing story. And for all those reasons, I'm very intimidated by it. Alrighty guys, those are the most intimidating books on my TBR pile. Let me know down below some books you've been putting off, as I would love to know, so we can kind of, you know, be in this together. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye.